Blue Valentine was bold and genre-fusing, full of tempo shifts and daring, loud textures. It was a statement of possibility. Crescendo takes that adventurousness and polishes it into a focused cinematic statement. NMIXX still takes risks. Metric ambiguity, unusual textures, dense harmonic stacks, but those risks now serve a clearer emotional narrative.
No, I'm not a writer.
Okay.
There are songs that you like, and then there are songs that rearrange the furniture, settle inside your chest. And NMIXX's Crescendo did that for me. I'm not trying to be dramatic, so I'll just say it plainly. I love this song. This is me explaining why it makes my chest feel weird in the best possible way, and why it feels like a milestone in the band's evolution from Blue Valentine to now. Crescendo begins like someone is leaning in to whisper something private.
No question, had to tell
The vocal is glassy and close, recorded so near the microphone that you can hear breath, soft consonants, the tiny mouth noises that most pop mixes try to erase. It makes the singers feel like they're right next to you. But the song doesn't stay small. Without ever feeling cheap or manipulative, it turns that private moment into a huge communal exhale. It promises a rise and then keeps its promise. At the heart of what makes Crescendo work are micro decisions in the production. There are 3 core moves I keep coming back to: the intimacy engine, the expansive world, and the bloom, the instant the song opens up and takes your breath. The intimacy engine lives in the vocal. The vocals are kept dry and close for a reason. Transient control softens the attack. Parallel compressions brings the quietest breaths forward. And the mix itself leaves room for those tiny textures to exist. Those details aren't mistakes. They're the song's emotional glue. When you hear a whispery consonant or a breath, you feel like someone is speaking directly into your ear. That whisper-close proximity makes the verses feel private, but urgent. And it's why the chorus, I think, lands so hard. Because you've been pulled in so close. That the expansion feels like revelation when it occurs. Surrounding that intimacy is a deliberately huge world. Everything outside the vocals is widened and layered. Harmonies stacked across octaves, hard panning that stretches out the stereo field, long-haul reverbs on the pads, and backing elements. The vocal stays dead center for focus, while the rest of the mix reads like a landscape. And that contrast, a voice in your ear and a cathedral around it, is the song's emotional engine. It's the tension between right here and huge. And the group uses it like a lever to pry open your chest. Then there's the bloom. Right before the chorus, a drum fill, tiny rhythmic shove signals the shift. The vocal processing moves from dry to wet. A hall or cathedral reverb tail appears. Harmonic stacks thicken, and that stereo field opens. That pre-delay, the split second before the reverb swells, is a tiny but brilliant trick. It keeps the vocals dry for a heartbeat and then lets the room swallow it. In practice, you go from that private whisper to a public proclamation in a single heartbeat. That sonic booming is the song's namesake in action. Tension builds, then it crescendos into release. Textures in Crescendo are deliciously weird in all the right ways. They are glitchy synths that sound like a broken metronome, little witchy effects that feel magical, and classical style swells that give the whole thing its cinematic weight. None of it is gratuitous, in my opinion. The glitchy bits are the heart-skipping. The swells are the breath-catching. The weird sound effects are the world tilting on its axis. Those elements keep you off balance in a way that makes the payoff feel earned. Rhythmically, the song refuses to be pinned down. The lyric, "took away my metronome," is both a line and a thesis. The song deliberately removes the comfort of a steady, predictable pulse. Metric modulations and tempo ambiguity make sections of the song feel like they are floating or shifting under your feet. Small rhythmic hiccups and stuttering glitches act as emotional punctuation. This isn't sloppy timing, poor composition. It's a compositional choice that turns rhythm into narrative. Where Blue Valentine, one of my favorite songs of theirs, felt collagey in its experimentation, essentially a lot of ideas being thrown at the wall, Crescendo takes those experiments and focuses them through tempo play and metric ambiguity. Of course, vocals are a huge part of the magic. The vocals have this velvety texture that can be breathy and intimate 1 second and very siren-like the next. The harmonies, like I said earlier, stacked and panned so they feel like a physical presence, not just background prettiness, but actual structural elements that carry rhythm and emotion. The harmonies are instruments. They scaffold the chorus. They lift it.
Oh my God, out of control.
The group's a cappella chops, which we know, we've seen, their technical flexes, are now integrated into the arrangement as primary tools for shaping its tension and release. There's also restraint here that I deeply respect. The song could have gone full melodrama, and I think would have collapsed under its own weight. Instead, it keeps the verses spare and lets the chorus earn its grandeur. Even in the maximal moments, there's space for the human stuff. An errant breath, a tiny imperfection. Those things are the balance between polished production and raw humanity. And I think leaning a little bit into that rawness is what makes the emotional moments of the song land. Now, the thing about the lyrics in Crescendo is that they don't just talk about the emotion, they behave like emotion itself. Crescendo uses musical language the way some people use metaphors for weather or light. Everything is phrased like the only vocabulary big enough to hold this feeling is the vocabulary of music itself. The opening verse feels like stepping into a private acoustic chamber where the rest of the world just falls away. The background really does vanish. The long day dissolves. And suddenly the only thing that exists is this one voice right in front of you. It's quiet, but not empty. It's the kind of quiet that tells you something is about to shift. And then the chorus hits, and the whole metaphor snaps into focus. When they say, "This love took away my metronome," it's literal in the emotional sense. A metronome is what keeps you steady, predictable, on beat. Losing it means the ground tilts a little. The relationship stops following a clean grid and starts following feeling instead. It's messy, but in a way that feels freeing rather than frightening. Even that strange little phrase, deep and shallow, strange because it's an oxymoron, suddenly makes sense. The feeling of something enormous happening in a moment that looks small from the outside, like a single note that somehow fills an entire room. And the song keeps moving. The musical terms become a kind of emotional map. What starts as a decrescendo, the world dimming so lovers can come into focus, slowly slips into a real crescendo. Everything gets louder, fuller, more consuming. By the time you reach the bridge, the metaphor has widened into a whole choreography. The lover becomes conductor and drummer, the one who sets the tempo, whether allegro or lento, and the speaker becomes the instrument, willing to move with it. It doesn't read as submission, it reads as trust, a choosing to follow a rhythm that feels more honest than anything imposed from outside. Now, the second verse shifts the frame again. It stops pretending this is some fairy tale with a guaranteed ending and instead claims the relationship as something chosen. No permission needed. No external measure to meet. The metronome is gone. and with it, the pressure to perform a perfect rhythm for anyone else. What's left is heat rising, the world widening, the sense that connection is something actively being built rather than something handed to you. So by the time the final chorus arrives, the chaos hasn't disappeared, it's just no longer destabilizing. It's shared now. The rhythm belongs to the lovers. The emotional arc mirrors the musical one. Quiet beginning, a tightening coil, a blooming release, and then that feeling of standing inside something larger than either of them alone. With Crescendo, you can feel all of that emotional and musical language building towards something bigger as the song progresses. And that's where I think this release starts to connect back to NMIXX's larger story. If you followed them since Blue Valentine, Crescendo feels like a logical next step. Blue Valentine was bold and genre-fusing, full of tempo shifts and daring, loud textures. It was a statement of possibility. Crescendo takes that adventurousness and polishes it into a focused cinematic statement. NMIXX still takes risks, metric ambiguity, unusual textures, dense harmonic stacks, but those risks now serve a clearer emotional narrative. The result is less, look at all the things we can do from an experimentation perspective, and more, here's the story we want to tell. For me, there's a moment in the track where the technical and the emotional stop being separate things. The drum fill that launches the chorus isn't just a drum fill, it's a shove in the chest. The pre-delay on the reverb isn't just an engineering trick, it's a dramatic pause that makes the wash of sound feel like revelation. Those micro decisions are, to me, the difference between a good pop song and one that actually moves you. One more thing I'd like to call out, the Lorde vibes. I will find a Lorde vibe. If I enjoy it and I hear it, I will find that Lorde vibe. Here, it's in the slow burn, it's in the wait for it structure, it's in the moody intro, it's in those harmonies, but here, dang, they're to the max. So did I think of Lorde and did I think of melodrama specifically when I first heard this song? Absolutely, because I love Lorde. And I think she has executed similar emotional language. She has found a way to balance emotional language, musical language, and atmospheric language extremely well. And so it's a compliment. But of course, that sort of reference is just useful shorthand for a feeling, right? It's only one color in a much larger palette of what the song actually is. But it's taking into account, for me, a similar emotional blueprint. But NMIXX definitely takes it and folds it into their own weird, theatrical prog pop world. For me, comparisons always help explain a sensation, not necessarily the song's actual identity. Now, moving away from the lyrics, the instrumental architecture is worth lingering on a little bit longer. There are warm synth pads that create depth without smothering the vocals. There is a pulsing bass line that anchors momentum. While we have very light percussive elements that flicker at the edges. The arrangement is a gradual layering process where earlier sections are intentionally sparse to highlight vocal color, and then later sections introduce brighter synths, more pronounced rhythmic accents, and very subtle strings or pad swells to emphasize rising intensity. And then the bridge pulls back to expose this raw emotion before the final chorus blooms into its fullest form. Each repeated section is developed rather than copy-pasted. Little elements shift, textures bleed into each other, and the song keeps evolving. That makes the whole thing feel alive, like you're moving through a landscape rather than just watching a sequence of events. What I think Crescendo keeps circling back to, and what keeps circling back for me, is the way it makes feeling physical. Not symbolic, not metaphorical, but literal. The way the vocals sit right against your ear, the way the reverb blooms like a long expanding, the way the rhythm slips just enough to make your heart stutter with it. The song doesn't ask you to rise, it just lifts you, and your body follows before you have time to think about why. There's a moment right before the chorus where everything holds its breath. The vocal is still close, the room is not yet open, and that tiny suspension is the part that gets me every re-listen. For me, it's the hinge of the whole track. The world is small, then suddenly it isn't. The floor shifts, the air widens, and the rest of the mix rushes in like light through a door you didn't realize was already cracked open. And that's why I think the chorus melts me. Not because it's big, but because the song has spent so much time being careful with me. I think it earns the lift. It earns the rush. It earns the feeling of being carried somewhere larger than where you started. Crescendo is NMIXX taking every strange, theatrical, technically brilliant instinct they have and shaping it into something that feels both intimate and enormous. A small, windowed view that turns into the entire skyline. I don't love it because I think it's perfect. I definitely don't love it for its length, but I love it because it moves, because it knows exactly how to hold you close, exactly when to let go, and exactly how to make that release feel like the only possible answer. Because when the world finally opens, it feels like the song has been waiting for you to open with it. And honestly, I think that's enough for my love. I'm fine with that being the whole thing.
Well, folks, it's time to kick it old school.